Welcome to the Woven Drop tutorial with me, Rachel Carter. I'd suggest you watch the video with a cup of tea or coffee and just relax, and then watch it again when you're ready to open your kit and start. So here's the reef knot. Left over right and under. Right over left, left under, and pull. It's not a particularly strong knot, but when working with lengths of fibre the same diameter, it holds pretty well for the purposes of crochet. Now here's how to finger crochet. You're basically going to be taking a loop and passing it through another loop, and it's the chain stitch. I use my thumb to push the loop through the first loop, then hold still and push another one through. Have a couple of tries at this. It's something that you can just simply undo if you get it wrong. Just keep trying with a length until you feel confident with your chain stitching. You can see a fairly even length of chain stitch. Have a go and see if you can find a method that works for you. So remember, once you've created a loop, to hold it so it doesn't undo whilst you're making the next loop to push through. You want to try and get each loop roughly the same size so you get a uniformity across the surface of your sculpture. And if you decided that you don't like it, simply pull and the chain stitch will come undone. Now let's take a look at the course. Open your kit and you'll need the two halves of the Y basket frame. Bring them together, trying to line up the circle on the top of the frame. Use your tie wraps and secure the first one. Now don't over tighten your first tie wrap. You need a little flexibility as you work around the frame. Once you've done top and bottom, put two on each side. Once all 6 are on, double check that the frames are matching and you can see a clear circle at the top. And choose a tie wrap, pull it tight and snip off the tail and push the cut edge to the inside of the basket. Work your way around, tightening each one and snipping and turning them into the inside. You're almost ready to start crocheting your sculpture. Now we're ready to start weaving. Take one of your bundles out of your kit and separate a length. You're going to create a large loop on the end of your fibre and just pass it under one part of the frame. Then pass the entire reel of your fibre through that loop. It's a little tricky, as you can see. And then pull tightly, and that should secure your fibre to your frame. So let's start. We're just going to dive straight in, make your first loop, and then continue to push a loop through. You're going to work your way around the surface of the sphere. Now occasionally I'll tuck one of the loops underneath the frame. Oh dear, I've just dropped one. If you do drop a stitch, just grab the end and just give it a little pull to make sure that it's still part of the chain. You can see I'm working my way around the circumference, chain stitching as I go, and getting a fairly uniform circle. With our first layer of fibre, the frame's quite important. Obviously it's going to give us our shape, but also it gives us plenty of places to fasten the fibre to the frame. So every other chain, I just took the loop underneath the frame and then come back out again and continue with my chain stitching, and that way it adheres to the surface. So when you're doing your chain stitch and weaving your drop, just find a position that's comfortable for you. So unlike the sphere weaving course where the fibre is flying all over the place and you need plenty of space, this one you can do just sitting on an armchair, and the fibre doesn't move around that much, so you don't need a great deal of space. So I'm coming to the end of a piece, and if you've forgotten how to fasten it, just go back to the start and watch the little video to show you how to fasten two ends together using the reef knot. So I'm just finding the other end of the fibre, creating my reef knot, and make sure you do your reef knot and leave plenty of fibre spare. What I mean is, don't leave little tails that might just simply undo. So for a while you're going to continue weaving, and you're going to come to the join and you'll have a double thickness. Just work with the double thickness. It's a little tricky to start with because you're working a double thickness, and when the tails run out, don't worry about them. They may stick out, but later on we can just simply tuck them in and make sure that they're not protruding from the frame. So there you go, just continue working with the chain, having added on a second lot of fibre. Now you'll notice when you unbox your kit, your reels of fibre, they come in sets of 4. I find it a really good method to stretch them right out. So if you've got a yard, a garden, even the front room, just stretch out that roll and then separate each strand individually into separate rolls. Then that way, once you start your crocheting and you're getting the hang of it, you haven't got to suddenly stop to go and sort yourself another length of fibre. So there you go, I've just found a little end piece, just tuck that into the frame so it's out the way. And you can see I've almost covered the bottom half. So I'm looking to see where there might be gaps, and I'm looking to head in that direction. I've spotted a gap and I'm moving my chain towards the gap. looks like I'm coming to the end of the fibre again. Now here's another little tip for you. Once you find you're coming to the end, make that last loop larger. That way it's not going to just simply undo, and it's easier to spot once you've let go of your chain and you're busy doing your reef knot and fastening on your new fibre. You don't want to suddenly turn around and see all your chains have just popped undone. So by pulling through a bit of extra fibre so you've got a nice large loop, it gives you just a helping hand when you come back. But don't forget, once you've fastened your reef knot, make that loop a little smaller again, back to normal size, and then carry on weaving. So I'm working both thicknesses together, pulling them through as if they were one, and ignoring the tail once that runs out. I can come back to that later. Starting to get a really good coverage now on this bottom half. Now at this stage, once you've got a good coverage on and it feels like it's pretty secure, then you can start tucking your loops under other loops and stop using the frame so much. So I'm working my way back to the top. Remember, pull a large loop and then add on your next lot of fibre using your reef knot. Pull your loop, pull a bit through to make it the same size as the others, and off you go again. I'm doing the weaving in the garden outside of my studio. You can see there's little bits of scorch dotted all over the place. I think there's one just hanging above my head, which is a very large drop, which gave me the inspiration for this workshop. Now you may have noticed that I've only covered the bottom half of the sphere and I've left a bit open at the top, and that's going to become evident soon when I'll be showing you the next step. So I'm coming to the end of this piece of fibre, and we're not going to fasten another one on. This time we're going to finish it. So I'm going to take the tail and pass it through the last chain and pull it tight, and then I'm just finding places to wrap and tuck the piece to secure it and tuck it in to the frame. And there you have the first step complete, and you'll notice I've left a big circle at the top. For this next stage, you're going to collect your envelope and take your chain out. Now I'm using my bird feeder. You could use anything with a hook, So the washing line or a hook on the door, anything at all where you can hang your chain from. So I'm fastening each of the clasps at the end of the chain to the circle on the framework. Try and space the three evenly apart, and then it will hang much better. I've got all three clasps on. I'm just checking the positioning and how it's sitting to see if it's sitting level. So now we're going to start weaving the top half of the drop. Now, as we're starting afresh with the fibre, remember when we first started we made a large loop, threaded it through the frame, and then passed the entire roll through that large loop. So just make sure that you don't pull your loop away from the frame. Don't forget the tail. Hold the two together until it's secured onto your frame. And then we can continue chain stitching. I'm just going to do a few chains around the top of the frame just until we get back into a rhythm and we're back onto a single width of eco fibre and we've gone past that join. So I'm working my way around, and the aim of this next stage is to create that tapering top of the drop, and we're going to use the chains from the hanging hook as a guideline. So once you've got a bit of a routine going, you're going to do a run of chains but up into the air. Once you've got around 5 or 6 chains, then you can pass your next chain through some of the metal chain, fixing it. And again, another run of around 5 chains, and then again fastening to the metal chain. We're going to keep repeating this process of making a couple of chains and fixing it until we start creating a movement going from the base all the way up. But if at any point you're not happy with where your chains are going and you think, oh, I just really don't like that last bit, then just simply pull the fibre to undo your stitches. But do bear with this stage. It will suddenly come together and start looking more and more like a woven drop. As you get more and more fibre working its way upwards to the top of the hook, you'll need to do less and less series of chains in the air and use what's there. So if you imagine when we were working on the bottom half, we had a frame to work on, but with the top of the drop we've got very little chain, so that we're doing a series of 4 or 5 chain stitches with our fibre and then hooking it into something. But as that is laid on, we can start using those stitches that are already there, and that will start to bring in that shape at the top and start to give you that conical part of the drop. I must admit the bird feeder was pretty handy for this stage because I could just move it around where I needed, and it's just got simple 2 prongs in the bottom, so I could just push it into the lawn, and it was a great height to work with. Occasionally when you're working on something that's hanging and you're continuously moving it around, you do need to let it unwind every now and again, otherwise it'll just suddenly spring and then want to spin. So every now and again just pull a large loop through and let go and let it right itself. Oh, now Max has made an appearance, so that's my little dog Max. He comes to the studio with me every day. You can see the conical shape of the drop is really starting to form now. So I'm going to show you from a different angle for this next bit. So I've got a fairly nice drop shape and I'm happy with that. So now it's a case of working all over. So try not being too regimented about where you're going. So try and just let the stitching inform you. So if it feels like it wants to go in one direction, go with it. But then equally, if you do spot a large gap, just work your way towards it. I find if you stick to a regimented weave where you're spiraling round and round to the set sort of space every time, you don't get that nice fluid movement. Whereas if you just sort of go with the flow, you tend to get an even coverage, but it looks more naturalistic. So as you continue working over the surface of the drop, we're going to try and highlight some of these pieces of the chain stitch. So when you push your new chain through, see if you can then grab that new chain and maybe some of the loops that are already on the surface. So you could have 2 or 3 pieces of fibre in your hand, and push the new chain underneath all of those pieces. What that does is it brings all of those pieces together and it starts to highlight. You don't have to do this all the time with every stitch, but if you push a new stitch through the fibre and it's lining up perfectly with a circle that's already there, then pick the 2 of them and work them together. That way it starts thickening up, but it also highlights and creates a sort of honeycomb-like pattern on the surface of your drop. At this stage, if working the drop suspended isn't working for you, you can just then simply unhook it and work it on your knee instead, because now you can see at this stage we've already got a formed drop. It just needs a little thickening. I'm working the drop now on my knee as the drop shape is formed and I just need to thicken it up. So you can see now we've got a lot of fibre already on the surface, and occasionally, there you go, look, see there's one there that I think I'm going to put those 2 together, hold them, push a new chain through. So just going to keep working across the surface. If we find pieces that we like together, grab the 2 together and push a new chain through. As it gets thicker and thicker, you might sometimes need to use the crocheting hook. So if you have a look in your toolkit, you'll find that there's a large crochet hook, and this comes in really useful when you just can't get your finger into that frame to pick up your hook. There we go. So the crocheting hook is there just to stop you straining your fingers and trying to squeeze them into little holes and getting them stuck. Just use the hook instead. Continuing working across the surface, adding new chains and connecting with old chains that are already there. So at this stage you've got a good coverage and we're thickening up, so just take your time. You've got plenty of fibre, so just work all over the surface. If you need to keep stepping back, then just pop it back on the hook, take a step back and have a look and see where you think you might need to thicken it up. So I'd only recommend doing this stage once you are happy with the initial shape of that drop, because what we're doing now is just adding further fibre, thickening up the surface and adding to that honeycomb-like surface. I've moved my drop back outside now so I can have a look at the finished piece. And to finish off, once you get to an end of fibre, I think we've covered this already but in the course, but we'll go through it again. Your final stitch, make your loop like so, take the end and just thread it through that last chain stitch and pull it tight. That should secure your stitches. With the remaining fibre, just wrap it through and round different chains on the surface so that it helps to hold that still. And once you're finished and come to the end of your tail, just tuck that last little bit inside the surface of the drop. And there you go, your finished woven drop. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to have a go at some of the other kits that I have, then do pop on my website. And I'll leave you with a couple of pictures of some of the other sculptures I've created in the past using this chain stitch technique and the same eco fibre that you're using. Thank you.